All right, people, once we're done with our CSS grid tutorial, as well as CSS grid mini project, now let's build a bigger project using CSS grid. Now, before we take a look at the actual project, a couple of things that I would like to mention. Since this is a CSS grid project, all the layout is done with CSS grid. And like the rest of the project, it is responsive. So I'm not going to show you for each and every section how it looks on a small screen. Just remember, project is responsive, and regardless of the screen size, the project will look awesome. Now we'll start with our nav bar, and that's going to be the look on a bigger screen. But then once we minimize the screen, we'll have our logo as well as the toggle button. Once we click on a button, we'll have our sidebar, and then of course in the sidebar, we can still navigate around our project, close the sidebar, as well as display some social media icons. After that, we have our hero, where on a bigger screen we'll have the image as well as the info, but then on a smaller screen, we'll just have the info about the person. Our next section is going to be about, where we'll have the image as well as the info about the person. Then we have services. So each service will have a card. And then as I'm hovering over the card, notice we'll change the color for the service. Then we'll have latest works, which is going to be very, very cool section, because in this one, we'll build out a custom layout using CSS grid. So what happens on a smaller screens, we'll have one column layout, then two column, then three column layout. But then once we get to a bigger screen, we'll have a custom layout using CSS grid. So notice how the first item is effectively using two rows instead of one. And then let's say item number two is using two columns instead of just one. Then we'll have a very, very cool section where we'll take a look at how we can include video in the HTML. So how we can display video, and also how we can set up shapes in CSS. If you notice, the banner has this nice message shape, and then the whole section also has its own unique shape. After that, we'll have skills, where we'll take a look at how we can build progress bars in CSS. Again, for layout, of course, we'll use CSS grid. Then we'll have a very, very cool timeline section where we'll build out our own timeline as well as the blog. And the blog, of course, will represent articles. But what's really cool, we'll use CSS to spin our cards. So as I'm hovering over the card, notice I'm spinning it around. And then, of course, on the back, I can see that I have read more button. Then as I'm not hovering over the card, again, it goes back to normal. And then we'll have the footer as well as the few pages. We'll have our about page with some info about the person, and the project page where we'll take a look at the differences between auto fit and autofill. So again, the way the setup will work, you'll be able to add more projects here. I'm using here one project because we'll take a look at how we can set up columns without using media queries, and what would be the difference between auto fit and autofill. And lastly, we'll have contact, where again, we'll have some information about the person. Hopefully everyone enjoys the project, and let's get to work.